How's everyone doing today? Wonderful. Good to see you all here. COVID is beginning to lift and people are beginning to come back, and it's wonderful to see you all. For those of you who haven't been here recently, we have been reviewing the 5 principles of unity, the 12 powers of unity co-founder Charles Fillmore, and the metaphysical meaning of the Bible. Does everyone have one of these sheets when you came in? Did anybody come in the back and you don't have a handout? Okay, Glenn, and Glenn, I have some more here. Anybody else need a handout? Okay. This will help you kind of review a little bit as we go along, and we, of course, for the third one, want you to be sure to understand that the Bible stories are a blueprint for your evolution, and not just a bunch of stories that were told 3,500 to 2,000 years ago about people that we don't relate to anymore. Here at Unity, we do read the Bible metaphysically, where every character, person, place is a part of your psyche. We want to be sure that everyone realizes the amazing life changes that are possible for you when you understand and live by these principles and teachings. These are for you to help you have the wonderful life that you deserve. These truths, this wisdom that we've been concentrating on are not new. Certainly we're not trying to say they're new to Unity. They have run through all religions like a golden thread since time immemorial, because this is truth. It's always existed, but these truths have often been overlooked, misunderstood, and underrated, or completely ignored. This wisdom, however, is the very basis of our teachings here at Unity. And we believe that they are what Jesus the Christ originally taught before the Romans and other political forces got a hold of Christianity. Love, forgiveness, nonviolence were antithetical to Roman empire building, which is what they were into. When Jesus lived, he lived in a place where the Romans ruled. The Beatitudes were contradictory to their motivation of imperialism. They were taking over the world. Such things, for example, as reincarnation, were completely taken out of the Bible in the 4th century AD. And the interpretation of what was there was often not to help the oppressed and the poor, which was a major emphasis of Jesus the Christ. The Romans often used the institution of Christianity as a means to oppress those nations that they were trying to conquer, as a matter of fact. But fortunately, there was also in the 4th century a huge exodus from the cities, from the big cities to the desert, on the part of the more devout people, the people who really understood the teachings and wanted to preserve the teachings. They went to the desert. They were probably what we would call the true Christians, and they preserved these teachings and this wisdom and handed it down to us. These desert fathers and mothers did not believe in letting themselves be passively guided and ruled by the decadence that was going on at the time. They refused to go along with the accepted conventional values of the day. Does that sound familiar to anyone? They were the ones who upheld the true spiritual values as Jesus the Christ had originally taught. And that's the way Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore taught also. He interpreted these Bible stories, these parables, and this wisdom of the ages metaphysically, as they had been taught originally, as a blueprint for our enlightenment and salvation from a corrupt world and corrupt values. These stories are our stories. 3,500 to 2,000 years later, each one contains a spiritual, psychological truth that points to the way to a life of joy and peace, abundance, regardless of the outer conditions. This golden thread of truth that has run through all religions from time immemorial has been there because it is truth. People recognize truth, and they've preserved it. It's true for every human, everywhere, in every age, even if people don't understand it. Love of our fellow human beings, compassion toward those who need our help, forgiveness, and the realization that we are all one with each other and with God, that loving force that pervades every atom and cell of the universe. So let's review again. This will be actually the last time we'll have a chance to before Membership Sunday. So look at your handout, the 5 principles of unity teachings. These sum up the unity teachings, what we call truth. These are the 5 principles around which everything at Unity revolves. All the classes, the truth lessons, the songs, everything. Books out there for sale. They seem rather self-evident, but it takes a lifetime to really understand in depth and put them into practice. So look at these 5 principles again, or review if you've been here. The first one is that there is only one power and presence in the whole universe, and that is God, that pervades everything and everyone. The second one is that we are all part of God. We all are divine. We all have that spark of divinity within us. The third one is that we create our entire world with our thoughts. Regardless of what's going on seemingly out there, we create our world. The fourth one is about prayer and the importance of prayer, because that is the time when we realize our connection. We reconnect, so to speak. We've never really disconnected, but we realize our connection with God. And the fifth one is that it's not enough to just know these things. We need to live them in our daily lives. I'd now like to share with you part of the introduction to Unity's booklet, The 5 Principles for Spiritual Living. It's about these 5 principles. It was written by Reverend Paul Roche. He's an ordained Unity minister who has a doctorate in comparative religion from Oxford University in England. So he really understands these Unity principles and how they have run through all religions, which Charles Fillmore was very much of a student of, which incidentally is the subject of his latest book, Paul Roche, Unity and World Religions, which is for sale out at the front desk. I'm going to quote Charles Roche, Dr. Roche. When Charles and Myrtle Fillmore began developing Unity in the late 1800s, they read widely from other religions. They noticed, as many have, that the same fundamental teachings run like a golden thread through the world's great faiths. It has been called the perennial philosophy, which became the foundation of the spiritual principles taught at Unity. Fast forward to 1990, when the founder's great-granddaughter, Connie Fillmore, was asked to synthesize the Unity teachings. She boiled down a century's worth of spiritual explorations into 5 statements that we at Unity call the 5 principles. Connie Fillmore must have been divinely inspired, because these 5 statements that appear so simple on the surface can take a lifetime to really understand and practice in depth. The 5 principles may not seem new to you, and indeed they do not belong to any given faith or denomination. They have guided human existence around the world for thousands of years, handed down by master teachers. End of quote. This booklet goes on to talk about how each of the 5 principles in depth affects our life, can affect our lives greatly. It shows the remarkable results in the lives of those people who actually practice them and understand them. These are stories about what it takes to live in true oneness with God all the time. Principle 1, how can we know that we are divine? Principle 2, how we can change our thoughts so we can create the magnificent lives that we deserve to live and that is our birthright. Principle 3, it goes into how prayer and meditation, which is a form of prayer, keeps us in constant contact with the divine omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence, God. Principle 4, and it gives myriad examples of how we can practice these truths in our daily lives so that we can manifest all the 12 powers that Charles Fillmore taught. The first principle, the fact that there's only one presence, God the good, in the whole universe is called the great mystery, which is underneath all physical creation. The question is, the subject of today's talk, how can we crack open our human shell that we've got around us, our mind, our intellect, so that we can experience our oneness with God? Our conditioning in this day and age is to feel separate from everything and everyone, from God too. Most of us have this shell of years of programming to crack open in order to fully realize our oneness with each other, with all of life, with the environment, with God. We talk about that all the time in Course of Miracles. That's a central theme. Now, again, as the Course of Miracles tells us, it's our ego, the part of us that feels separate from other people and God, is what we call our ego. The ego makes us think that we're out there alone in the world, separate from everyone, at odds with and competition with everything and everyone, even separate from God. This creates fear. The solution to that feeling of aloneness is to work on setting aside that individual I, that ego. Just set it aside. The ego is like a mask. It's our false personality. We can put on the mask to play the game of life, to play our role from time to time, like we do at Mardi Gras sometimes, huh? But this persona is not who we really are. We all get used to living with this persona. To think so would be like playing a part maybe in some Broadway play, and you play it for so long that you start thinking you're the character who's playing the part. When we quit identifying with the ego, it's like we become nobody for a while. We're reading this book in the Wednesday night class, Being Nobody, Going Nowhere. Some people at first felt like, well, I don't really want to be nobody. There's another book I'm reading, No Self, No Problem. Well, what does that mean? We let our false personality or ego go. But then, by doing so, we then can become our authentic self, who we really are. We are one with God. We are divine. That's who we really are. And it is then that we're able to be all that we are. In other words, by giving up our ego, we are no longer limiting ourselves. We have the access to the omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence of God. We're divine. And then we start manifesting all 12 of these powers that Charles Fillmore was talking about, that we all have within us. But in our lives, most of the time, we are not able to utilize them. If you look at your sheet, these 12 powers that Fillmore spoke of are faith, strength, wisdom, love, power, imagination, understanding, order, zeal, elimination, and life. We should be able to manifest these all the time, which help us live the magnificent lives that we could be living. When we let go of our individual ego, our persona, and we become nobody or no self, we realize who we really are. We're one with God, and we unblock our access to the omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence of Spirit. And that is what the second principle means. We all are divine. We are so much more than our separate bodies and histories and experiences. We are all bodies, histories, and experiences. We have access to everything, the omniscience of the world, all knowledge and all wisdom. This letting go of our separateness and the realization of our divinity, Unity Principles 1 and 2, are our path to freedom, the path to being able to manifest all that we are, all that we can be, all 12 powers. The latest science confirms that there is a unified field of intelligence. I'm sure you've all been reading about that the last 10 years. That is everywhere present and connects us all. Our job is to let go of that old paradigm that we've been hanging on to and access what really is and live it, this unity of all life. We must let go of our belief in just appearances, that the physical world is all there is. The reality is that there is no such thing as a separate person or a separate life from God. It just doesn't exist. And if we let go of that ego, we start realizing that ye are gods, the Bible says. There is only one presence and one power in the universe, God the omnipotent, and you are that. The great Eric Butterworth expressed it very well. He said, and I quote, "God is spirit, present in its entirety in every point in space at the same time. And what we call God or spirit or allness or divine mind, principle, or whatever word we have for ultimate reality or oneness. This ultimate energy pervades the universe, connecting all things, all people. It is expressed in mathematics, and it is expressed in poetry. It courses through our bodies and minds and connects us all." End of quote. Isn't Butterworth wonderful? Those of you who have read Butterworth know how great he is. Dr. Reverend Paul Roche says that God is not a being, but beingness itself, flowing through the world in ordered harmony. It is the wholeness and naturalness of the natural world and all sentient beings, knowing no boundaries. Thus, every person is our brother and sister. End of quote. In Acts 1:28, it says, "In him we move and live and have our being. We know this at an intuitive level, of course. We all do. But our brain and intellect just haven't caught up with our intuition. And that's the shell we're trying to break through. In terms of Principle 3, which says we create our whole world with our thoughts, and Principle 5, that talks about the importance of living these principles, Reverend Roche says, and I quote, "Working for the greater good is not just about changing outer institutions and power structures, but harnessing the world-changing powers of our minds." And this is where the 12 powers of Charles Fillmore come in. Notice my visual aids here. I'm a teacher. Teachers love visual aids. These 7 candles, as I told you last week, represent the 7 powers of the year, January through July. By the Christmas service, we'll have lighted all 12 of them. These powers represent what we all have within us to draw upon to create a happier, fuller life. Our job is to activate them. At this point, you might ask, well, what do I do to more fully use these 12 powers and live the unity principles so that I too can create a life of joy, love, and abundance that I was meant to enjoy? What do I do? And that's where the 4th principle comes in, the importance of prayer. When you pray or meditate, you reestablish your oneness with God. You leave your worldly ego or your state of separateness behind. It is then that you're able to become nobody, being nobody, going nowhere. That's when you can become nobody, which really means that you merge with God and every being. You become your authentic self then and access all the powers. You then can live the unity principles because nothing's blocking your access to them. You're no longer separating yourself from God and the universe and other people and your abundance. You've become one with it. You don't have to pray. Praying isn't to get something. Praying is to open you up to realizing it's already there. You already have everything. The abundance is there. We just are programmed not to see it, to feel separate from this abundance. Simple but profound, these 5 unity principles. Easy, but it takes a lifetime to fully understand and attain them. However, every step on the path takes you closer to peace and joy, love, and fulfillment that you so deserve. The 3rd thing we've been talking about is the importance at unity of the metaphysical meaning of the Bible. For example, let's take the story of Noah's Ark. Is everybody fairly familiar with that story? Raise your hand if you're fairly familiar with Noah's Ark. Okay, I'm going to pass out something when we take up the collection. I don't want to distract you now, but I couldn't help myself. It's a cartoon. Noah himself, the man, lived a very pure and noble life. He went against the worldly current of his time. So God decided to send a great flood to get rid of the sin and worldliness that had taken over. But God showed Noah how to survive, right? God told him how to build an ark to float above the sinful world. There were exact measurements and requirements for making this ark, and Noah followed the blueprint exactly. Now, this is a perfect example of the biblical meaning of unto him that hath, it shall be given. Mark 4:25. What Noah had was purity, goodness, and wisdom. So he was given the means to escape all that wasn't godly. All the people on earth who were worshiping false gods and not living by the eternal wisdom and the eternal laws. Unto him that hath, it shall be given. Noah's Ark is our story. We too have been given the wisdom, that's our ark, and the know-how to build our ark and rise above the earthly plane of existence, that worldly current that's going all the time. With that wisdom, or that ark, we too can sail to a new and better life, away from the ways of the world that cause so much suffering. Our ark is our spiritual wisdom, like the 5 principles, for example, the eternal truths in all religions. It is the knowledge of such things as the 10 Commandments, the 12 powers, the Eightfold Buddhist Path, 5 unity principles, which teach us how to rise above the worldliness and suffering that are out there and live richer, freer, and more joyful and loving lives. That's what we want. Why are we, like Noah, provided with such wisdom? Because we made the choice, like Noah, to live above the earthly plane and live at a higher, more noble, more godly level of life. This is why you're here today instead of out heaven knows where. Thus, we can recognize that wisdom. It's there for everybody. It's not hidden, but they can't see it because maybe they haven't purified their lives and their vision enough to recognize it. They're just out there suffering and they don't know why. We have chosen to be the chosen ones that the Bible talks about so much because we have chosen ourselves a higher path than the worldly one. Noah was good and wise and pure. So God gave him the way to rise above the current of life, the flood, when it came. When we commit to follow the high road, we too are able to see more clearly how to live a joyful, peaceful, loving life. Metaphysically, we are Noah, and our spiritual growth has allowed us protection, a spiritual ark. So we can escape life's deep and dark currents of suffering, drowning in worldly pursuits very often. I'm sure you see this every day, people suffering. They don't know why their lives aren't working. It's so clear to you, but they don't get it. Every kind of animal was put on the ark with him. So why? Why 2 of each animal? So that he could then populate the new land that he was going to. Metaphysically, these animals are our thoughts with which we populate or create our lives. Unity principle number 3. So Noah eventually landed on dry land, symbolic of where we land when we follow the eternal wisdom and laws. We avoid or escape the floods and disasters and suffering of life on our spiritual ark of wisdom. We thrive while others, unfortunately, often drown. That is, their lives don't work. The story of Noah's Ark, like all stories in the Bible, is your story to use every day. Noah lived in the so-called real world like we do. The people had degenerated in that world, but Noah chose the high road. Because of that, Noah was given the guidance, the tools, the wisdom he needed, his ark, in other words, to escape from the suffering that worldly ways, unfortunately, often lead to. We are like Noah in that respect. We have chosen to live righteous lives and thus put ourselves in a position to be able to build our ark to safety and freedom and start a new kind of existence. and populate it with our higher thoughts, our animals, which will multiply then. These higher, more positive thoughts, they will multiply and populate our new world with the joy, peace, and abundance that we all want. So, we have had this month a little review of some of the highlights of the unity path. The 5 principles, the 12 powers that Fillmore said we all possess, and some of the metaphysical meaning of the Bible. This is what we're about here at Unity, discovering and following the spiritual path to our promised land, our heaven on earth, our dry land, our state of peace, love, abundance, and fulfillment that is totally possible for everyone. It's about being all that we can be, that we were meant to be, and that we want to be. Psychologically and physically healthy, happy, wise, and successful. That is your birthright. That is everyone's birthright, and what every spiritual path is about. How to attain that happiness and peace and love. These teachings are the secret teachings of the ages. A secret because they are actually kind of hard to find and then grasp if the Noah part of us hasn't really prepared ourselves yet. It sometimes requires our swimming against the current of worldly life for a time, like Noah did. It's up to us to choose the way that we want to think and live and to build our ark to freedom and safe land. That dry land that Noah found is the abundant life that we too can live, should we choose to. A land of safety and peace, populated with our higher, wiser thoughts, our animals that we load on our ark, our thoughts that we put in our head. These more enlightened and loving thoughts will multiply, and they will manifest a miraculous life, your kingdom of heaven on earth. This land is there waiting for you, this dry land. You need only make the effort to live according to the eternal wisdom, then to build your ark, your spiritual life, and then fill it with your wisdom thoughts, your animals. The Bible is a blueprint to higher consciousness. The 12 powers are your possibilities to manifest, and the 5 unity principles are the wisdom tools that will enable you to build your spiritual ark, which will carry you to your promised land. So happy sailing, bon voyage, peace be with you.